Greetings and welcome to our daily Devo for Tuesday, the 3rd of January already. Wow, where's the year going? The 3rd of January today on this Wednesday, actually. Is it? Did I say Tuesday? I could be confused. Wednesday, the 3rd of January. We pick up more of Jesus' parables as we're in this section on his final days in Jerusalem. This one's entitled The Sheep and Goats on Judgment Day. The sheep and goats on Judgment Day comes from Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 to 46. They quote verses 32 and 33 here. All the nations, not as we understand nations with borders and boundaries, but people groups. And those overlap over our borders, right? All around the world. It's like that. All the nations will be gathered before him. And he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. The last event on the last day of the world's history will be the final judgment. In these verses, Jesus likens it to the management of a Middle Eastern flock. In ancient Israel, sheep and goats were commingled for most of the year in the family flock. That is because both contributed to the well-being of the family in their own way. Sheep provided wool for clothing and better tasting meat. Goats contributed high-quality milk and material for making tent panels and containers. Since both types of livestock required similar care and pasture, they were kept together in one flock. Jesus uses this image of the commingled flock to portray the commingled world in which believers and unbelievers live on the same neighborhood block, attend the same schools, shop at the same stores, and work in the same locations. Just in general, we're living life side by side, believers and unbelievers. The Middle Eastern flock was separated when the family gave attention to tasks unique to either the sheep or goats. For example, when they milked the goats or sheared the sheep. Jesus describes Judgment Day as a day for separating the people of the world because they will face different eternal fates. Believers will enjoy the inheritance prepared for them since the creation of the world, Matthew 25:34. Unbelievers will know the cursed eternity shared by the devil and his angels. So how will that day turn out for you? How will that day turn out for me? The Lord has made a change in us that secures our eternity, Romans 8:30. This internal change that is unseen produces external evidence that can be seen. Don't ever forget that. If somebody says they're a Christian and there's no evidence, then as John would say in his first epistle, they're lying. Jesus points us to the love we lavish on those who are socially disadvantaged and in need. The hungry, thirsty, strangers, those inadequately clothed and in prison. We may not be able to physically see the changes the Lord has made in us that secure our eternal life, but we can see the difference it makes in our lives, in our choices, in our priorities, in how we treat other people. And Jesus obviously sees it too. Truly I tell you, he says in Matthew 25:40, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. All kinds of images could come to mind in this. I think of the many voices we hear over the immigrant issue today, and it's not just here in America, it's in Europe, it's in Asia. People being scattered, people for one reason or another, whether it's violence or some kind of natural disaster, or crops not growing, or whatever the case may be, or there's just in their culture and economy, there is no opportunity to better one's position in life, to earn more. Many, many, many people in our world today live on less than $2 a day. How do we treat these people? What do we say about them? How do we look at them? Do we look down our nose at them? Or do we look and think, oh, what can I do? What can I do? There are ministries, obviously, that are there in those places. We can support them, making sure we verify their legitimacy. We want to be wise stewards of the Lord's resources. There are those who have yet to hear the gospel. We can support people who God calls to go to those places. Or maybe we can be open to hearing God's calling to us to go to those places. Those places might just be on the other side of town. Those places just might be your next door neighbor. We have to have eyes to see these things. As often as you did it unto the least of these, you did it unto me. We're living in a world with skewed priorities. My heart's broken when I hear about a baseball player being signed for $700 million. Or football players, or basketball players, anybody who's playing a sport, a game that as kids we just played for fun. It's troubling, the world's priorities and how we look at things and what we think is important. And Jesus will weed that all out someday. You over here, you who sacrificed, you who were generous, you who were cheerful givers, you who ministered to these people who needed help and nobody else was doing it, you're over here. You're blessed. You're mine. You people who saw all of these same things and yet complained because your milk was costing 25 cents more a gallon this year than it was last year, or your eggs or whatever, and yet you still had the money to buy it. Could not see yourself as to giving and sharing in any way with others, helping those who cannot help themselves. You're not mine. That's not how mine are. That's not how they live. And that's the judgment. That's the determination that will take place. Many people will say, as in that parable as you read it, in that story as you read it, when did we see you in those conditions, Jesus? Well, when you help those people who are poor, when you help those people who are hurting, when you help those people who are in need, that was me you were helping. As often as you did it for them, you did it for me. When did we not see you? When you didn't see me in those people, when you didn't see me in those needs, that was me. You could have helped, but you chose not to. Be a lot of scratching of heads, but Jesus' determination will be the final and correct one for all of us. For all of us. Blessings to you today, the sheep and the goats. What does your life reflect? Read that passage. Read that passage in Matthew 25, 31 to 46. And who in your life are the ones that fit those categories? And how are you responding to them? Be prepared, for the Lord is coming. Blessings to you today on this third day of the brand new year.